now embarking on step number 10 of the 12-step program. As we know, we have gone through a whole lot in step number 1 through 9. In fact, that's the main body of the program. Step 10, 11, and 12 are known as the maintenance part of the program. By now, we've learned the importance of having a relationship with God. We're discovering the new attitude, the new relationship with God, and we've discovered the obstacles in our path in step number 4 and 5. We now, in step number 2 and 3, believe that God can restore our lives to sanity, and we've made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. In step number 6 and 7, we've asked God to help us with our defects of character, and we understand that our very, very important and crucial part of our success is to change our character defects into character attributes. It's called the turnaround. We've learned all this. We've learned in step 8 and 9 how to make amends for all the harm that we've done as porn addicts. So a lot has been accomplished. A lot has been accomplished. By now, with God's help and with our part in it, we have some sobriety under our belt. Our use of pornography has become less and less. We have more days of sobriety. How do we keep that? What are we looking out for? How do we maintain that sobriety? That's what step 10 is about. So let's continue our reading on page 84 and 85. Very important reading. I hope you have your own big book so you can read along with me. Bill Wilson writes, "This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue." Now listen to what I'm emphasizing within the reading, and I think you'll get the gist of this and the point. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory. That's from step number 4. And continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. That's in step number 9. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We learned this in step number 4 and 5. We have entered the world of our spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. And what I'm about to share with you is known as the plan of action for the man in recovery. It says, number 1, we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Number 2, when these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. Number 3, we discuss them with someone immediately. And number 4, made amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. And number 5, then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. And this is all capped off by saying love and tolerance of others is our code. Now, the plan of action for the man in recovery speaks volumes. In fact, you could almost say that the entire 12-step program is in these 5 sentences, these 5 parts of the plan of action for the man in recovery. Our goal, our desire is to stay sober. But guess what? Sobriety is not the end all of this. Sobriety, and I have news for you, is not really our goal. Recovery is. We learned about cause and effect when we looked at step number 4. We learned even in step number 1 that the powerlessness over our porn addiction is not the problem, it's our solution. Our problem is the unmanageability of life. Step number 4 and 5 and 8 and 9 help us understand what we can do about the unmanageability of our life. Sobriety is not our ultimate goal. Sobriety is quite desirable, and it's why we're here. But our ultimate goal is a change of thinking, the recovery mindset. So let's look a little bit more closely at these 5 parts of the plan of action for the man in recovery. And as I emphasized before, listen carefully. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Well, I don't know about you, but as a porn addict, my interest is always whether or not I have an open internet, or is it blocked? Do I have an access to a smartphone, an iPhone, or an Android that allows me to get through the internet? Think about all the times that we had a block on our computer and we tried to get around that. Shouldn't we be watching for that? Shouldn't we be watching for those things in the street that arouse us, the pretty girls, that arouse us to go home and look at some pornography? Shouldn't we be looking for the opportunity to act out again when our wife leaves the home? The answer is no. According to Bill Wilson and this proven pathway to recovery, what we should be looking for is selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. That is why we act out, is because of our selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. I have a whole new life now. The addict is paying very little attention to the sobriety and the acting out and the pornography. We're way beyond that. In fact, this is very interesting. If you look at the entire 12 steps from 1 to 12, how many times do you think the word alcohol was written by Bill Wilson? I mean, if after all that's the problem, if I were writing the 12 steps, I would include the word alcohol numerous times probably in all of the 12 steps. Well, in fact, you'll see that the word alcohol is only in step number 1 and really in only half of step number 1. That means that in all of the 12 steps, alcohol, the drug of choice, our quote-unquote problem, is only 1/24 of the 12 steps. Our pathway to freedom, our ability to maintain our sobriety and recovery, is by continuing to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. In the second part of the plan of action for the man in recovery, it says, when these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We have to remind ourselves, like we've learned in multiple steps, that we have a partnership with God. I do my part, He does His part. In step number 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to God. And as we understood when we learned step number 3, that we turn our thoughts and our actions over to God. We include Him. We include our higher power. My power, my self-sufficiency, my self-reliance has not been sufficient in order for me to be sober. In the plan of action number 3, we discuss them with someone immediately. Remember, we discussed that self-appraisal, self-reliance doesn't work. Isolation is not isolation. By being isolated, by just working on myself through my own devices, is really rather interesting and quite ineffective. You know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I have to turn outside of myself. I have to turn to a higher power, and I have to turn to my sponsor. In number 4 here, it says, made amends quickly if we've harmed anybody. We cannot afford to maintain our relationships with others as the way they have been before. If we've harmed someone, we rid ourselves of that nagging, painful regret and shame. We make amends. And number 5, we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone when it can help. Friends, we get out of ourselves. The mentality here is to be of service, to be of support to others. We do that best when we're helping others, when we practice love and tolerance of others as our code. So what's the common thread to 1 through 5 in this plan of action? In 1, it says continue. In number 2, it says at once. In number 3, it says immediately. In number 4, it says quickly. And number 5 says resolutely. That says one thing, and one thing that is our pathway to recovery. Do it now. Do it often. Stay on top of it. And then you can maintain your sobriety.